and we're proud to sponsor the Growth Track this year at Denver Startup Week. We're a company that just entered a rapid growth phase, so we felt it was particularly appropriate. When my business partner and I started Friday Health Plans 5 years ago, we knew we wanted to create a company that catered to people who bought their own health insurance. The Affordable Care Act was just getting going, and we saw an opportunity to serve a brand new market of health insurance consumers. Independent consultants, startup groups, gig workers, service industry workers, designers, creators, and other independent professionals, like many of you here today. We knew that if we built a health plan that was simple to buy, easy to use, had great customer service, and most of all was affordable, we could compete against the big insurance plans who only focus on serving big companies. After spending 5 years getting into the Colorado market and completing a successful proof of concept, we successfully closed a $50 million round of growth funding earlier this year. We're now about to expand to 3 additional states later this year, hire more than 400 employees to support our growth, and eventually be in more than 10 states by 2025. I wish each of you good luck in your startup and growth pursuits. And as you think about your upcoming health insurance needs, I hope you consider fellow growing startup Friday Health Plans. Open enrollment starts November 1st. Check us out at fridayhealthplans.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Jake Cohen, the Growth Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you for joining us for our first ever virtual Denver Startup Week. If 2020 has taught us anything, it's that we are more powerful when we come together as a community to share ideas and help make each other better. And here we are, virtually showing the world what Denver is made of. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, and the intersectionality of identities. There's something for everyone at DSW, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to hand it over to Anne for her session on SEO.
Thank you so much, Jake. I'm just going to bring up my screen real fast. Oh, it looks like, Jake, are you able to give me the ability to show my deck?
Let's see if we can turn that on here. Try it now, Anne.
Here we go. All right, well, thank you so much for taking some time out of your afternoon to join me. I am going to be talking about how to uncover the magic to ranking on Google. And let me know if this sound is working. So for those who don't know, that is a clip from Wreck-It Ralph. And for most people, the internet is not that intuitive. It's not that easy to just search for what you're looking for. And most people don't know, like Penelope, that the fastest way to get your answer is to type in very specifically what you're looking for. So if you have ever had a website or you have a URL that you own and you haven't made it completely private, chances are you've gotten an email like this. There are tons and tons of people out there there that just scrape the internet for public information about domains, offering you services to help your website rank. So this is one of probably 150 emails I get every year because I have this website domain public, and people have the ability to send you emails on it. And so they're always promising some SEO magic. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that SEO magic is. So there are a lot of promises you hear. A lot of things, a lot of people will say that you're going to get your site on Google in just 30 days. You're going to be at #1 in just 30 days. Some people will say, you know, we can get you to the first place on Google in 3 months, or that you have to submit your site to Google. So there's lots and lots of things that people say about SEO, but we're going to talk about what some of those truths are. So first up, this is a black cat in a black hat. And a lot of those promises come from something that used to be known as black hat with an H. It was kind of the dark side of the internet, the things that people would do to trick search engines. And over the last 10 years, the internet has evolved, and search engines like Google have evolved to try and prevent people from doing these black hat tactics. So some of the things that you may have heard of is, if you want to rank really quickly, you need to pay for a bunch of backlinks. You need to hide a ton of keywords on your website. You need to go around and find every competitor website and leave a bunch of comments, or you need to just put a ton of keywords on your website. So all of that is considered black hat tactics, and those are things that are not necessarily as accepted today, and they don't work. So what is it that does work? Here's another example of some things that people may see that's considered black hat that may not work. These are tags that you'll see at the bottom of blog posts. So I just grabbed a bunch off of a couple of random websites. These are typically, people think that they're saying this is what this content is about, but most people don't search for baking soda if they're looking for something about how to clean their home. Most people don't search for family photography, newborn photography, parenting in Dallas if they're looking for a photographer in Dallas. And most people don't search for affordable if they're looking for couples photography in Denver. So these are just a few examples of ways that people try to trick the back end of Google, and they don't necessarily work. So what is the magic trick? We don't have a magic wand, right? But we do want our websites to rank. So a little bit about me and why I'm talking to you today. So I've been in digital marketing since 2009. I've watched as Google has changed their algorithms and seen what's happened. I started my career in social media, and at the time, social media and blog posts were a big part of SEO, and it's evolved into what is now known as search engine optimization. You know, in 2009, people were just starting to understand how to get their websites to rank, and today there's a lot of science behind it. So my background is in digital media, digital marketing, marketing automation, and I have both a blog and a website that I've included here. And then you can also reach me on Twitter at Rocky Mountain Bliss. So I've watched as Google has evolved and as the algorithms have changed. And so over the last decade, Google has changed their algorithm a ton of times. They do it approximately every 6 months to a year. And in the beginning, they had really cute names. One of the first algorithm updates was the panda, followed by the penguin. And then they had the hummingbird and the pigeon and the tree frog. And then they had rank brain. And it just keeps changing and changing and changing. And ultimately, all of those cutesy names, they've stopped giving because they're now changing their website so fast and changing their algorithm so fast that there's no need to give it a cute name. So in order to experiment in SEO and in search engine optimization, I built a website. I built this website back when I was really focusing on social media and influencer marketing. And this was my ground for experimentation. I wanted to see what would work in SEO. I wanted to see what would work in influencer marketing. I just wanted to see what it was like to do these things that I was asking people to do on my behalf. I was hiring influencers. And so I wanted to really understand what I was asking them to do. And the best way to do that was to create my own blog. So this is my blog. This is Rocky Mountain Bliss. It is very much my hobby. It is a passion project. I continue to keep it up and I test what's going on Google because Google changes so fast. There's so much happening so quickly that it's really important to be able to know and test it out right away. So SEO magic trick number 1 that I'm going to share with you. First off, to rank highly on Google is you want to identify and solve a problem. One of the biggest challenges I see with business websites is that people tend to think about themselves when they create their website. They talk about what their business does. They talk about themselves. They talk about their products, but they don't talk about what the problem is that they solve. They don't look at it through the customer's eyes. And so it's really, really easy to become short-sighted when you're creating your website. And you want to think about your website specifically from an SEO perspective of what are the problems that you're going to solve. And what are the questions that people who use your service asking to search through the internet before they get to you? So, for example, on my blog, I write a lot about party planning. And one of the things that happened this year, obviously, as we all know, is coronavirus. So all of the things that I had planned for summer content, talking about barbecues and Kentucky Derby parties and, family get-togethers, all of that was no longer content that really was going to make sense from an SEO perspective or even from a readership perspective. So I decided I was going to write a post about a virtual baby shower. At the time, I was just testing out the keyword virtual baby shower. There was no historical ranking for me to gauge off of. This wasn't something a lot of people were talking about. It wasn't something people were searching for. So I took a guess. And so this is where my blog post is today. So there are over 50 million results. And when you search for Zoom virtual baby shower, and this post shows at number 2. And so I'm going to show you how we got there. So number 2, you want to build your website using features Google likes. So you saw on that past screen that at the bottom it had rankings and it had some stars. And so those are things that Google likes. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you make those show up. So some of the tricks that you can use to get Google to like your site. When you're putting text in, you want to put in alt text on every single image. So when you're uploading images, so for instance, this here is an image of, magic tricks from Catch Me If You Can, maybe. I can't remember what movie this is, but it's a pretty good magic movie. So you go ahead and you want to make sure you describe what's in the picture. This is not a place to put in 15 keywords. It's intentional. You need to say very specifically, what is this image? Alt text was intended to help users who had visual, issues seeing the images. So for that to work properly, you need to be descriptive and you need to say what it is. And that tells search engines what's in the image and therefore gives you an opportunity to put a keyword in. You want to make sure that your website loads fast. So Google has a tool called Page Speed, and that allows you to create or to test your site and test out if it has bloat. And bloat is what happens when you have a ton of code that helps your site lay itself out. If you have a ton of stuff that is running in the background, there's lots of things that can happen on your website that's going to slow it down. And that page speed test is going to tell you how fast your site is loading. It'll give you an actual grade. So you want to have a high grade to be able to get that fast load time. You want to utilize things like schema.org. So schema.org is not, I don't believe it was created by Google, but it is favored by Google. And that's what gives my site the ability to have those rankings on my posts. It tells the site and it tells Google search engine what it is specifically that your site is doing. What is your site showing them? So for a how-to post like that virtual blog post, the virtual baby shower post, you can tell it that it's a how-to. You can tell it that it has steps, and that's all done through schema. And so schema, depending on how your site is built, you can either manually add it into the code, and it's not going to impact your load time because it's supposed to be a very slim amount of code. Or if you're using a tool like WordPress, you can install plugins that will put it in for you. There's lots of ways to do schema, but it's very important if you want your site to show up highly in those search engine rankings. And then lastly, you want to subscribe to the tools that Google has. Most people are aware of Google Search or Google Analytics, but not everyone uses Search Console. And Search Console is a very, very powerful tool that Google offers completely for free for all site owners. So if you haven't already, verify your site with Search Console, and it's going to give you some information that you wouldn't be able to get elsewhere. And I'll show you a little example of what that looks like. So magic trick 3 is you want to write content for people, not machines. Everyone thinks, with search engines, you want to write content for search engines, and that's just not the true. Arnold from Terminator is not searching your website. That's not what Google is. Google is not the Terminator. Google is simply using people's search behavior, people's everyday behavior that they're capturing about us already to create what order rankings appear in. So you want to write content that's relevant to people. You want to write content that's real, authentic, and answers questions. So when I talk about writing content for people, the biggest thing you want to do is not keyword stuff. Every page on your site should be focused on one single keyword. So that means that if you're a photographer, say you're a photographer here in Denver, you want to have a page about Denver wedding photography. You may also want to have a page about Denver engagement photography. Say you also do senior photos. You want to have a third page about Denver senior photography. You don't want to have one page that's optimized for Denver wedding photography, Denver engagement photography, Denver senior photos, Denver maternity photography. When you put all of those keywords on one page, Google doesn't know what it is. Google doesn't know how to rank it. So it makes it really hard for Google to show that that page is what's relevant to the people who are searching. You want to use things like headers, numbers, and bullets. Those are really important for readability. And when readability is easy, it also shows Google what's the most important thing. So if you're using headers, you're going to use the headers with your keywords in them. You're going to make it really easy for your reader to read it. You want to think like a person. If it's too much text and it's too big of a block and you wouldn't read it, chances are anyone who visits your website is not going to read it. And Google is looking for those signals. They're seeing what's happening when people hit your site. And so you want to make sure you create content that's following best practices for how people navigate the web. And ideally, when you're writing content to optimize for search engines, you want to have at least 300 words. You know, one of the things I see on a lot of sites is so many beautiful pictures, but there's almost no text. And unfortunately, search engines, they really can't see those images. They can see the alt tags, but they can't see anything else. So you want to have more content on the page. And I know it goes against every bone in your body if you design websites to have more than 300 words. To have, you know, people love to have those really minimalist websites, but they don't perform well from a search engine perspective. The things that perform really well from a search engine perspective are optimized for a single keyword and are over 1,000 words. That's really, really important. If you can create really powerful content, that's what's going to rank on search engines, especially if you're in a competitive space. And then trick number 4 is updating and optimizing your content. So it's really important that this is not a set it and forget it situation. You want to make sure you're going back and looking at your content and making sure that it's relevant, making sure that it's accurate, and making sure that if there's anything that needs to be changed, you're doing those changes. And so Search Console will give you some of those things. So we're going to go back to that example of that virtual baby shower post. So I published that in early March of this year. The page was up for approximately 2 weeks when I received this email. So Search Console, if you use Google Analytics, it's very easy to sign up for Search Console. You just, I would say Google Search Console, you search for it and sign up for it. It sees that you have Google Analytics installed and it allows you to easily connect your website. And then it's always watching all of the content on your website to see what's happening to that content and where people are searching. So I received an email that said my how to host a virtual baby shower post was starting to perform well. On average, I was getting 33 daily clicks. And this was from early March to early April. So it started, approximately 2 weeks after I had put this post live. And this was a very, this is a fast trending up page. And so I went into the Google Search Console to see specifically what was going on. So Google Search Console will tell you specifically what keywords is bringing content or bringing users to your website. So in this instance, I had optimized the first blog post for how to plan a virtual baby shower. That's what the URL was. But people were searching for Zoom. How do I plan a Zoom baby shower? That's what everybody knows how to use. That's what everyone was most comfortable with. That's the tool that when we all went to work from home, everyone was using Zoom. So people were searching for Zoom baby shower games, Zoom baby shower ideas. When I wrote that post, it wasn't about how to host a Zoom baby shower. It was simply how to host a baby shower online. So I went back and I re-optimized the post. I worked into the headers the word Zoom. I created an entire paragraph about using Zoom for a baby shower. I created a secondary piece of content about Zoom baby shower games. So I added to that existing page based on what Search Console was showing me that people were searching. And this is what happened. And this is why I'm talking about how do you make your content rank in less than a month. So I pushed this post live on March 16th. From March 16th to approximately the beginning of April, it was getting about 33 visits per day. On April 3rd, I re-optimized the post based on the feedback that I was pulling from Google Search Console. Within 2 weeks, I went from having an average of 33 visitors per day on that one page to having over 1,000 visits in one day. And then consistently since then, that page now averages 500 visits per day. So that's really the power in when you pay attention to what's bringing people to your site and you re-optimize it. And it helped me really own that number one position. So I toggle back and forth between baby list on that number one position on the given day. And baby list is a much bigger site. That's a site that has thousands and thousands of articles. My blog does not have thousands of articles. It has hundreds of articles. I've been writing it for about 5 years, but it doesn't have that much content on it in comparison to baby list. So to be able to compete with them and show up, in the top 2 positions against that post is really kind of, an exciting thing. And this is how you do it. Anybody can compete like that. You don't have to have a ton of content on your site. You just have to pay attention to what's bringing people to your page. So what I really like to remember, and I think is one of the most important things you can do with SEO, is know that search engine optimization is not a sprint. It's possible, yes, to rank on something in less than 30 days. It isn't impossible. It's not magic. All you have to do is find a term that people are going to be looking for, optimize your pages appropriately, create good content, and then you'll rank in less than a month. But for the most part, SEO is going to be something you want to think of as a marathon. It takes time. It takes a lot of effort, but there's still a ton of value in it. So another piece of content that I like to use as an example is I wrote in, I think it was back in actually, it looks like the date is actually on here. It was 2016. In 2016, I wrote a blog post about deviled eggs. Nothing that's really special. There are thousands and thousands of deviled egg recipes. Everyone's family has a deviled egg recipe. But mine shows up on Google. When you search for spicy mustard deviled eggs, mine shows up as the number one position here. It shows up with an image, it shows up with time, and it shows up above a website like All Recipes, which again is another website that has thousands and thousands of pages of content. So to be able to rank here above them it's a really exciting opportunity. And the reason this ranks here is because it uses those things that I talked about. It's written for people. It uses schema.org. So the search engine knows that this is a recipe because it's structured like a recipe. And so those are the 2 big important things that allow this to rank the way it does. But what's interesting to see is that even though that's a really powerful piece of content, throughout the rest of the year, people aren't searching for deviled eggs. People aren't looking for deviled egg recipes every day of the week. And so this is just last year. And this is in the month of November. So it was written as a Thanksgiving recipe because in my family, at least, that's when we really eat a lot of deviled eggs. And then again, at Easter, when people have hard-boiled eggs that they're trying to find a way to use up. And this is pretty consistent with what other people do as well. And so when you see this, you can see that I have these spikes that are present in those 2 timeframes. So in the month of November, this page had almost 10,000 page views. So that's why it's important to think about SEO as not just what you're going to do to rank number 1 next week, but what are you going to do to rank number 1 consistently and have timely content? Because when that content is something people are searching for and is something that people are interested in, then you're going to show up there. So it's one of those things that it's important to remember that you may not immediately get 1,000 visitors per day on a piece of content, but if what you're creating is timely and relevant, at specific times of the year, you're going to see people really hitting that traffic. So again, these are the magic tricks. There's really no secret to any of this, but this is something that I really like to, people to take away from talking about SEO is the number one thing you need to do is you need to identify and solve a problem. If your website has pages on it that just talk about you need to rethink those pages. You need to think about what are your product offerings doing for your customers? And that's also, that's not just an SEO issue, that's also a user experience issue and a customer journey issue. So all of these things are intertwined. And so if you start thinking about your customer journey and your user experience, start thinking about your SEO at the same time. What are those problems that people who come to you are trying to solve for? So identify and solve problems. Then build your website using features Google likes. Make sure that your website is fast. Make sure that you're using things like schema.org. Make sure that you have your website structured the way that Google is going to best be able to search through that content. Then write your good content. Write content for people. You have people who visit your website. Think about how would you, if you were trying to solve the problem that your business offers, how would you search for it? Would you search for something very specific like eBay Sugar Rush, eBay Sugar Rush steering wheel? Probably not. You probably would be more like Ralph, and you probably would start with going through that autofill and what is it that you're actually looking for, trying to answer the question. And then revisit that content. Pay attention to the signals that Google's sending you. Look at what's bringing people to your site and update and optimize. So those are the big things I wanted everybody to take away. And I know that that's a lot of information in a really fast amount of time. So I have some time that I set aside for questions. So if you have questions, please just drop them into the Q&A, and then I can go through there and start answering them for you. All right, so Julia asked, what is the name of the tool to check website loading time? So website loading time, you can check, it's called Google Page Speed Test. And it's one of those things that it looks kind of clunky, and it'll test it for both desktop and mobile. And you can then go forward from there and take the things it says and take those to a developer if you're not a developer, and say, hey, this is where I'm getting negative ratings from Google on these things. Usually what I see a lot of is it's going to be like pages need to be cached or images are too big. Those are the biggest issues that everyone has. You want to optimize your images for web. Images don't need to be the same as if you're printing them on a billboard. They need to be optimized smaller. So 72 DPI and under 3 megapixels is what I recommend for optimizing images. Okay, so we have a question that is, are there things you would recommend including in meta tags, keywords and description that would help improve rankings? Yes. So meta tags are what actually show on Google. So when you're searching for something and that description pops up, that's actually your meta description. Meta tags themselves, there used to be a code section called meta tags. You don't actually need to put anything in there. Google doesn't use it anymore. So don't bother, taking up time filling out meta tags, but do fill out your meta description. So whatever your page is optimized for, that single keyword that your page is optimized for should be in your meta description. So that's the most important thing. You don't want that description to be too long because Google can only see a certain amount of it. Google can only, it'll only see approximately, I think it's 170 characters. So think of it like a tweet. So if otherwise it gives you that ... So try and be really concise. It should be one sentence that talks about very specifically what's on that page and then what they can expect when they click through. Because if people see something on Google that doesn't align with their expectations, that's when they leave, and they call that a bounce. And a high bounce rate can also damage your performance on SEO. Okay, Catherine O asked, what about Pinterest? Do you encourage people to link their blog with Pinterest rich pins? So Pinterest is a search engine. So yes, if you are using Pinterest, you should be using Pinterest rich tags or Pinterest rich pins. It allows Pinterest to pull all of that content the same way schema.org does onto Pinterest. So it's very important that you use the tools that Pinterest provides to you. So if there are plugins that you can install, or if you just need to grab the code snippet from Pinterest, definitely do it. It's worth it because Pinterest likes that you're using that content. Okay, so I have a question from, it looks like this is not someone's actual name. So it is from, should older sites be updated to WordPress versus Weebly to improve SEO results? Sites like Weebly and Wix and Squarespace, they've come a really long way. They've tried really hard to improve their SEO performance, but at the end of the day, they're using a lot of heavy script. And if you are in a very competitive space, I recommend WordPress. I recommend making that switch. And I know it's painful and I know it's hard, but it will be worth it in the long run. If you are going to switch from different platforms like a Weebly platform, one of the things to do that you just need to be cautious of and careful of is making sure you don't change your URLs. So, all of those tools, they're very powerful and they're very good and they've come a very long way. But I prefer WordPress. There are people who swear by Wix and swear by Squarespace. Those are kind of the other two that are very, very good. Weebly, I would try to get off of for the most part. And if you're using anything like the GoDaddy's WordPress or website builder or anything that comes out of the box from a domain host, I would probably steer away from those as well. Marjorie asked, can you speak to the impact of domain authority on ranking? I blog for a local realtor, and it seems we can't get any traction against the massive national sites like realtor.com and Zillow. So domain authority is very important. That is why one of those things I talked about a little bit is ranking against that baby list or ranking against all recipes. So domain authority is considered the trust of your website. How well do search engines trust your website? How well do search engines believe that content is good? And the place that that information comes from is from backlinks. So that's why we've gotten into this bad habit of people buying backlinks, buying up links on a variety of different sites and then sending traffic over just to create this impression of trust. It's really hard if you're in an incredibly competitive space like a realtor to rank against a site like Realtor or Zillow. They have invested millions of dollars and they have staffs of hundreds of people who are constantly getting backlinks. So it's going to be really, really hard to rank against them. However, if you try to rank for things that I call long tail keywords, it's going to be a great way to go around that. So Zillow might not be trying to optimize for a term like luxury houses in Sloan's Lake. That would be an example of a long tail keyword. So it's very specific. It's usually, 4 or 5 words. It's a full sentence. It's not just a keyword of, Denver homes. So you want to think about those long tail keywords, and that's where you're going to start seeing success against those bigger websites, because they aren't looking for those long tail pieces of content. And so if you can search out those long tail pieces of content, chances are the people who search those are going to be more qualified anyways. They're going to be more in your market. They're going to be specifically looking for someone like you and not someone like a realtor.com. Okay, so one of the questions from chat is Schema a plugin I can use in WordPress, or is it backend code taken from schema.org? It is both. You can both use schema.org code directly and add it. If you know how to do the programming by hand, you can add it in by hand. Totally fine. On the flip side, if you don't know how to do the programming by hand, there are tons of plugins on WordPress. It depends on which kind of schema you're going to use, which plugin you want. If you create recipes like I do, you need a plugin that specifically puts schema in for recipes. If you're a content creator, for example, the Mediavine Create plugin actually does a lot of that for recipes, how-tos, tutorials. If you're more specific into another space, like you want to write reviews, or you want to have, you want to tell people that this is a numbered list, you can use a more generic plugin. So next question is, if I'm writing a sales or homepage for my site, which covers a large number of issues my product solves or benefits, how do I optimize that page? Is it too broad to optimize? Not necessarily. So your homepage is always a tricky one. You can definitely have multiple keywords on your homepage. That's really the one exception to the rule, is having multiple things on your homepage, but you do want to have robust content. And that's the biggest issue that I see with a lot of web pages, is that their homepages are these beautiful splash pages that look gorgeous with videos, but there's no content on it. So the search engine doesn't know what you're trying to rank for. So if you want to optimize for 4 or 5 products on your homepage, that's the one instance it's okay, but you do need to have a paragraph of text about each of those products. You want to have approximately 100 to 200 words of text about each of those products on your homepage. And I know it goes against minimalist design and it goes against what everybody wants to do right now, but really that's the best way to optimize a homepage. And then that content should link to a much more robust page inside your website. So you have your homepage, which is your splash page. You have a little paragraph that teases the content about that product or the benefit that it provides. And then there should be a link that takes you to where there's more information. So you're kind of flowing people who hit the homepage, or you're really flowing the site spiders that hit the homepage through from that content to where there's more robust content. So you don't have to have everything on the homepage, but you do want to have a little bit of a teaser that sends people there. Okay, ooh, this is a long question. So Joshua asked, I work in multifamily housing, and strategically we try to add similar keywords to multiple pages. The search engine knows the location because of schema. However, I think it's redundant to add the same location based on modifiers to the tags on a separate page. What are your thoughts on this? 95% of SERP rankings are acquired through the homepage for these types of websites. So does it matter to add similar keywords to these other pages, such as amenities, layouts, location? So that's a really interesting question, Joshua. And hopefully I'm going to answer this the way that you're looking for. And if not, feel free to send back in another question and I can go through it. So I would say you don't want to be redundant. You're not necessarily, when you're talking about like amenities, layouts, and location, that's not necessarily redundant. Sometimes that's descriptive to what you're actually creating for a family housing type a piece of content or a family housing website. That's something that the user actually needs. But if it's the same, if it is actually the same for every single page, there's a chance you could be penalized for having redundant content or duplicate content. So it has to actually be unique. So that's the thing that I would find a balance to. If all of the locations have the same amenities, it would be better to have a secondary amenities page and link from your individual location pages to an amenities page. If the amenities vary from location to location, write a unique piece of content about those amenities, and that's not considered redundant. So hopefully that's what you were asking. If not, feel free to ping back in and I will go through it again. Catherine O asked, any tricks for when you're first starting out to getting traffic to your site, or do you just have to take it one page at a time? So similar to what I had mentioned about it being a marathon versus a sprint, you really do have to take it one page at a time. When you look at a piece of content or you look at a website, the fastest way to rank quickly is when you really focus on one specific topic. If you want to be the best recipe creator and you focus on gluten-free recipes, it's going to be easier to rank quickly as a gluten-free recipe dessert blogger than it is going to be to rank quickly as a gluten-free generic blogger. So that's kind of one of the things that you hear a lot of recommendations is that the more focused your site is, the faster it's going to rank, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. And when you think about it from a startup perspective, you're trying to compete in a new space. You're trying to compete against people who haven't, maybe it's a product that didn't exist before, or you're trying to disrupt an existing industry. And so really taking it one page at a time, I think is really important. And then not getting hung up on when things change. So Google is constantly changing, and you may, without even knowing it, you may hit something that Google changes next month. You may have a page that's performing incredibly well, and suddenly it's gone. Suddenly that page has disappeared from the internet, and you can't figure out why. And it's not that you did anything wrong, it's that something about the algorithm changed. And so you can see usually when that happens, if you start listening to things like SEO World, or search engine tips, there's a couple of different websites. People will see that there's like rumblings in the algorithm and people will start talking about it. But if you're not into that and you see something where suddenly a page that was performing really well on search engines just falls off, chances are it was an algorithm update. And it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means you need to learn what the change was and make those changes. But what I recommend for everyone that seems to be consistent across all algorithm updates is that if you're focusing on content and you're focusing on your user and you're focusing on your experience, your site will always perform well. It will very rarely fall off. Most of the people who are penalized by algorithm updates are penalized when they're using those black hat methods, when they're doing something that Google doesn't like. So yes, Catherine, definitely focus one page at a time. It's much easier if you focus on a single page and try to build that page up. Obviously you don't want to launch a website with only one page. Launch your website with all of the content, but then rotate through it. It can take you 2 months to get all the content up if you have 10 pages. If you have 150 pages, it's going to take you a much longer time. And I've worked in situations like that before, where we started with, just rolling through one page at a time, one keyword at a time, one piece of content at a time. You can focus on the ones that you think are most valuable for your business, and that's a good place to start. Okay, so Keith Zeff asks, on my board game party game company's website, we have links to our social media, but don't discuss or otherwise link to that content much. How do you recommend increasing the interplay between our website and social media in terms of driving traffic to both? So social media is a completely different strategy from SEO. What you're doing on social media is you really want to focus on content that keeps people engaged on those platforms. And I know that it's misleading because you think you want to get people off of social media onto your website. But the reality is that they're two different places. And social media doesn't like when people leave their site. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, their primary job is to keep you on their platform. And so if you're giving content that's going to take people away from their platform, chances are they're going to devalue your content on that platform, and it's not going to show at the same value or at the same level. So what I recommend is multi-using your content. So if you're creating a piece of content for your website, say you're writing a blog post, write the blog post for your content. Write the blog post about whatever it is that you're writing. Put it on your website. That's for SEO. That's for people who visit your website. Then take it and think about whatever your other social media platforms are that you want to work on. So say it's Instagram. Instagram, you can create carousels where you have multiple pictures that people can slide through one at a time. Take that content and recreate it for Instagram. Don't try and get people from Instagram to your blog post. Just take that good content and just repurpose it. Same thing with Facebook, same thing with YouTube. If you create the content for those specific platforms, you're ultimately going to be more successful on all platforms. And I know that that's hard. And I know that that's time consuming. So you don't have to be in all places at once. Pick the place that's going to work best for your business. As a board game company, I'm going to guess, without knowing anything about your business, I'm going to guess that probably Facebook, Instagram, and SEO are going to be the three primary places you should focus your time. Don't try to create platforms on every single social media site. Really focus and spend your time where you're going to see the most value, and then create one piece of content that's long form for your blog and create it into snippets for the other places. You can still have a link to the blog post from those, but you're going to want to put the beef of that content onto that platform in a way that applies to that platform. Marjorie asked, any recommendations for free or affordable tools to do keyword research? So Google Search Console is your best bet. Google Trends also is a great way to do keyword research. If you use Google Trends, it'll tell you over the past year. So I could search for virtual baby shower, for example. It's not going to tell me that this month X number of people have searched for virtual baby shower. That's really where you get into those paid tools. They're giving you that really condensed, comprehensive information. But what you will get in Google Trends is % increase over last year. So it'll say it's a 300% increase over last year, or whatever the term may be. Another great tool that you can use is Ask the Public. Ask the Public is it's kind of like a question formulator, but you can put in your website and it will give you questions that people might ask that would drive them to your website. And then it shows you, how does your site look and what does that search look like? And are you showing on page 1 or are you not showing on page 1? And do you want to be showing on page 1? So that's one of the ways that you can do some keyword research without investing in other tools. As far as paid tools go, I really like the SEMrush keyword tool. It's a very, very powerful tool for looking at keyword volume, but it is a commitment every month. It's usually, I think it's $100 a month for their entry-level package. So if you're not at a point where that makes sense to spend it, just start with Google Search Console. Start with Google Search Console and Google Trends, and that's going to give you a ton more information than you had in the past. Okay, so Michael asked, if you get hit by an algorithm update after you've made fixes, do you need to wait till the next update to recover, or can it happen before? So yes, you can recover faster. If you're hit by an update, you can definitely make those fixes and recover faster. If you're hit by an update where you're being penalized because of something black hat, it does sometimes take a little bit longer because it's going to take a while for the search engines to scrub out that bad content. I actually worked on a site where we had paid for some advertising. Very up and up, the way you're supposed to pay for banner advertising. But unbeknown to us, that site that we bought the advertising from was actually part of a paid backlink network. And they placed paid backlinks all over the internet, thousands and thousands of paid backlinks. And so when we were hit by the algorithm update that said, hey, you're not supposed to do that anymore, it did take a while to scrub all of that out. And so that's why it's really important to know when you're making, agreements with folks, or you're making, paid ad deals, that it should be a no follow backlink. That's what Google likes to see when you're paying for a link. But it's possible to recover, and you don't have to wait till the next algorithm update, because there's no way to know when Google's going to roll out another algorithm update. There was one in May that was pretty big, and then they rolled some stuff back in June. And then they rolled some stuff back again in July. And the July and June updates were not considered official core updates. And Google doesn't release any of this information. This is all speculation from inside the industry. So what you're doing when you see that you're suddenly being negatively impacted and trying to make changes, that's all progressive. It's all adding to your authority and adding to your website's credibility. And Google will catch it right away. They're not gonna penalize you long term for that if you're making the changes you need to make. Okay, so Bessie Medhurst asked, what's the best way to keep up to date with practices if we're not into following SEO heavily? So yes, Bessie, she asked if she could follow me. Yes, you can definitely follow me. I do share a lot of updates on both Twitter and on LinkedIn whenever I see things that come out. But you can always join, follow things like Search Engine Journal. That's one that I go through a lot. Moz is another really great publication. They actually sell a service that is a tool for keyword rankings, but they create a ton of content. So I really recommend Search Engine Journal and Moz. Mashable used to be a really good source. They've moved more into a tech space, but they did used to have a lot of updates on search engines when they change. So I always kind of keep them in the back of my mind, because sometimes they have some really good information. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I think I got everyone's question. One person asked if I'm willing to consult with you. Yes, of course. Send me a message on Twitter. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Rocky Mountain Bliss, or you can reach out on RockyMountainBliss.com, and I'm happy to talk to you if you have any more questions or you'd like to follow up later. So let me see if there's any other questions real fast, hiding in this other chat. Oh, I am so sorry that the sound was not working on that video. I think that is all the questions. So thank you so much for having me today. It was wonderful to get to meet everyone virtually. I hope everyone's staying safe and has a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and enjoy Denver Startup Week.